I'm gonna call the meeting to order here at 1 Academy Street on Tuesday, July 20th at 7:02. First item on the agenda is pledge of allegiance. Please join us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No additions. Nicole? Nope. Earl?
Done all that.
I'm good, thank you.
Kathy?
I'm good, thank you.
David, you need that in the agenda?
Yeah, we have a last minute request from the Champlain Housing. They're gonna be, repaving the lot.
Yeah.
And in August, they want to park their cars on our lot for 3 days.
Okay.
I'll put that under,
Well, we won't put it in there.
under the, at the end, in the other necessary business.
Okay. Parking. Ed, anything change?
No,
I'm good, thanks. Okay. Can I hear a motion to approve the July 6th regular select board meeting minutes?
I'll move.
A second?
I'll say that.
Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Public comment, anybody that's got anything to comment on that's not on the agenda?
Hi.
Oh, Betsy.
No, it's gonna be very quick, so hi.
I'm watching.
So I'm Betsy Fournier, I'm here on behalf of a couple of departments, so Swanton Enhancement Project, I just wanted to remind everybody that this Saturday is the 4th Street Property Community Input. So that will happen from 1 to 3 on Saturday, July 24th, so we would love it if the community could come out and, give us some community input on what they foresee for the future of the 4th Street property. I have flyers here if anybody would like some. So hopefully we'll see you all there. And I also kind of wanted to share with you this heritage walking tour that the Historical Society, the Swanton Enhancement Healthy Communities Task Force, and the Abernaki's put together. So I'm going to give you copies of them, and we're going to actually put together a walking tour on August 15th. There'll be more information to come with that as well. But it's a great way to kind of learn the heritage you have in your community. There was already a heritage walking tour, and we just took the opportunity to amplify it. So there's really cool color pictures and a nice walking route. Northwest Regional Planning helped us with it. The Messenger Print and Design designed it, and it was funded by Rise Vermont.
How long will it take? That's it.
How long does it take?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on how long you're gonna stand at each
Okay.
place and kind of really
Yeah.
get into descriptions, but it shouldn't take too long.
Okay, thank you.
And you can do it in pieces, you don't have to do it all in one time. I think that's what we're gonna do for the actual tour. We're gonna kind of break up into groups and kind of
That's it.
go out and about. And also, I don't know if David is gonna bring this up later, but I had emailed him earlier about the Swanton Recreation is applying for the Building Communities Grant. And we need a letter of support from the town, as well as the village and the planning commission. So I've emailed everybody, but we just, David's gonna talk to you about approving a letter of support for us.
You can talk
So-
about that right now.
We could,
No,
because
no,
it'll be
agenda,
short.
so.
This came in very recently.
Yeah.
And I haven't had time to write one yet for the board, but and she has to have this before the next meeting. So what I would suggest is that you just make a motion to appoint me to write the letter for the board and sign off on it. And I did one a few years ago, a similar grant for that. And then she'll have her letter from us.
Okay.
And then I also forwarded her request to the planning commission that they provide one also, and they'll do that at their July 28th meeting.
What's the grant for, Betsy? Is it?
It's a recreational grant, so we're asking for funds for enhancements to our recreation facility. We
Yeah.
have some dugouts that need repairs. We need some picnic tables, some carports
Okay.
for programming
A little bit
and,
of everything, sounds like.
yeah,
used
so
for.
like,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
facility enhancement.
Yeah. Is it a set fund you get, or is it just?
Well,
up
so
to
I
them?
don't have the estimated cost of it yet, I'm still putting out a few bids, cause we wanna do a paving project too.
Yeah,
And as
sure.
part of that, so I don't know how much it is, but it is required 50% match, but we have the money in our capital reserve funds
Good.
for the match.
So you're doing it as a joint bid, the paving and the,
So we're not really sure, so we did reach out to a couple paving companies and concrete companies for bids. So if you own a business that does any of that work, I'd be happy to give you my information and
I just do building on the side.
Oh, okay,
I don't do any of that, but I would recommend Home first, they just did my driveway.
oh, okay, yeah, great.
And she doesn't have all the details worked out yet, that's the reason.
Okay, well, I just was curious what kind of things the grant was gonna be used for, but that's fine, that's all I want to know. You got a question?
I'm just wanting to let you know that there's an issue with the meeting ID, don't know where it came from, so there may be people trying to get on Zoom who can't, just so you know that they can't get on.
Okay.
I'm Gordon Winters just texted me, I'm gonna try to get the word out, you know, because then hopefully this one does work, I just sent it to my husband.
Just so you know, in case you hear about it later.
Okay.
So we're not zooming?
We're gonna try, but no, we're not.
So as of right now, it's not on, so.
Oh, I know why, I don't know, the meeting ID is different than what was on the agenda, and I don't know why.
That.
Alright, okay. So we need to make a motion to have David write a letter of intent for Betsy for the grant.
I'll make the motion to allow David to write the grant, for building the community's grant for the rec.
You second on that?
second it.
Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. We just approved that to have you write that letter.
Okay.
So,
Alright.
And that was a letter of support, to clarify.
Yes.
Yeah, as soon as I get more details, thanks.
Yeah. Anything else for public comment?
There was a lady stopped by today who was,
Yep.
Up in
On Commerce
Sunrise, and she wanted to ask the
Yes.
select board to take over that road, that's what this
Yes,
is indicating.
but it's not on the agenda,
No, I told her it couldn't be under public comment,
Yeah.
so that she's not doing
not here, alright. Well, if she comes back, we can put it on the next agenda. Law enforcement, animal patrol officer monthly report. And we don't have Zoom, so you may not be zooming in. Yeah.
We did,
We do have a report.
We do
Oh,
have the
we got
report,
board,
right.
so.
We got Lauren, there we go, hold on,
Oh,
working.
good.
Mark probably doesn't have it, the other link, Jim.
He's trying right now.
Is it?
Is there, what is the appropriate link?
The appropriate link is 986
There's not.
417
Oh,
There
good.
you go.
Yeah.
See, next meeting.
986-417.
2686.
And the password?
There's no password.
Okay.
So while we're working on Zoom.
Yep.
Gordon, can you hear me? Check the-
Here's somebody.
Gordon, can you hear me?
Here's to you.
He's muted, Gordon.
I know, but.
Maybe try to switch your microphone to the computer.
Gordon, can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Can you record this Zoom just in case my mic isn't working on camera? It says it is, but.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I'm making progress, go ahead.
Okay, we're all set.
I'm not sure if you wanna come back to that, Jim is trying to access.
Okay, well, we can come back to it. Jim's trying to get through. Yep.
So if you are, can you mute yourself, please, unless you need to speak? Thank you.
We're good now. So we'll skip down to discuss dog issue with Mark Nolan. Mr. Nolan, how you doing?
Good evening, I'm doing very well. Thank you for taking the time to put me on the agenda to discuss the attack that happened to me on June 6th. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of how it happened and everything, but the bottom line is that I was attacked by a pit bull on my own property, as was my 2 yellow Labrador retrievers. So my questions tonight are gonna deal more with administrative and how you normally proceed when these situations happen. So my first question would be is that if I were to call the dog officer and express concern about a certain dog and ask for its tags to be checked and its rabies vaccination to be checked, what would my expectation be? Would I expect him to do that and then call me back, or what would I expect?
Well, I don't have an exact answer, but technically you could call the town clerk's office and ask if the person, if you know the person's name, if the dog's registered.
Right.
They would be able to tell you that here, clearly.
Or if I didn't know the dog's name, it was on a Sunday.
The owner's name, I mean, but, yeah.
The owner's?
If you knew the owner's name of the dog, you would call here and find out that information.
Okay,
Yeah.
the reason I ask is because on Friday, June 4th, I left a message with the dog officer expressing my concern, and I heard nothing back. No voicemail, no callback, and I was attacked by that same dog on Sunday afternoon at 1:45. So my concern with that is, why didn't he go and check it out, particularly when there was no rabies tags or anything else like that. So, be that as it may, I have a few more questions as this proceeds. So apparently we don't really know, there is no real set response time or anything like that, right? It's situational.
Well, generally, if someone calls in a complaint, Jim responds to it, depending on what the complaint is.
Okay.
That's
All
just-
right. So the other question I have is the dog officer trained to discern authentic rabies certificates?
No, I doubt it, no.
No. Would you expect him to be able to discern a valid rabies certificate for somebody who was attacked like myself?
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
I mean, you normally, I guess you would probably take the vaccination paperwork and go back to the vet, they verify it, you really need to verify it.
Okay. Right.
But,
The reason I ask that is because within 72 hours after an attack
Yeah.
by a dog, when you don't know whether it's been vaccinated or not, you need to begin certain treatments for rabies vaccinations. So within a 72-hour period of time, I had called the town office and trying to find out what the status of this dog was. And I got in my mailbox with no explanation of anything. I got an email from Jim, the dog officer, with a PDF of supposedly a rabies vaccination. So I open it up and I look at it, and I can tell from the get-go that it's false. There's no letterhead, there's no rabies tag number, there's nothing like this. So he sends that to me and with no explanation. Turns out that was fake. So we know that now. So what's the procedure when somebody passes you a fake rabies certificate? Do you issue them a ticket, a fine? Do you do anything when that happens?
never run into that, to be honest with you, with that, with the bogus vaccination, or the not the proper documents. Honestly, legally, I don't think you're gonna get anywhere with it.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
in my own opinion, but
what do you mean?
as far as taking legal action against somebody because they took.
I'm not
Maybe.
mentioning any
Yeah.
legal action or anything, what I'm getting at is what's gonna happen to the next person. So what's happened to me has happened to me.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure that there's accountability so that the next person that gets attacked, if they get attacked, there's a procedure in town, by the way, that it's handled, and it's specific, and it's written out in however that needs to happen. So legally, I believe that you can issue somebody a fine for passing a bad rabies certificate or any kind of documentation. It's fictitious, production of fictitious documentation. The person that gave this fictitious documentation to Jim Benson has done it before. So he doesn't know that, so in his defense, he wouldn't know that. But my point is that what are we gonna do to make sure that he knows the difference between a fake and a real rabies vaccination. For example, I sent a note to the town clerk asking, would you issue a dog registration based on this? I never got a response back, but I'm pretty sure that the answer is no. So, but this, I want to reiterate, this is all about rabies vaccinations. This is not about what happened to me, or it is somewhat, but how it's going to be handled again. So there needs to be a provision somehow that either he's trained or he knows the difference between a fictitious and a real rabies vaccination. Because if I was not astute enough to figure out that that was a fake, I might not have had the rabies vaccinations that I needed. So that's a risk to my personal health, and or somebody else's, so that's a really bad situation. And besides, the person was never issued a fine or anything for doing something like that. And to me, it feels like, you can't really just do whatever you want with that. The second piece of this is that if a dog attacks another person off of the owner's property, and in this case, it came into my yard, it's my property, it attacked my yellow lab and myself, causing me to be hospitalized. So my question is, why was that dog not impounded by the dog officer?
It should have been.
I requested that it was, and he declined, saying that he didn't know what to do with the dog, and he couldn't take it home.
Generally, when it's a dog, you consider it an attack, I consider it a dog bite, but yes, I understand what you're saying. Usually in a dog bite situation, the dog stays in the home that it belongs in, and is quarantined to the home for 10 days, like the proper procedure is.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
And this
also,
dog, technically, while it was living there when it happened, but technically that dog lived in a different county.
no, that's actually not correct. The way that the bylaw is written, it specifically says that it's the person that has custody of the dog.
Yeah.
And that dog may not be removed from the town without express written consent by the Board of Selectmen. And that's in the ordinance, which you yourself signed. So that's another problem. So again, this is not about me, this is about what's gonna happen the next time. How do we fix this moving forward? Because it does say, very specifically in here that it's not to leave. And it was allowed to leave. And in fact, I think that Mr. Benson preferred it to leave, because quite honestly, I think he wanted to wash his hands of it.
I don't see it washes hands good. Well, just to be clear, I'm not gonna argue that. Jim did follow up with the owner of the dog. He did do what he was supposed to do, went there, checked it, quarantined it for 10 days at the home, checked it again. He did the procedure what he was supposed to do. I know it wasn't at the house where it happened, but it was back to the original owners.
And you think that's okay to let it leave?
As long as it's quarantined,
How do you know it's quarantined when it's not in the town?
so if we went down the street and it happened down the street, do you think we're gonna go there every hour of the day and check on the dog and make sure it's in the house?
No, but you gotta follow your own bylaw and make sure it doesn't leave the town.
Is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, a lot more to discuss.
Yeah.
So, in the town report, actually, it specifies exactly what the dog officer does. And in this job description, it describes what he does. And it states specifically that this is for dogs only. So, one thing, it's an animal control officer, but it's really not an animal control officer, it's a dog officer.
He's an animal control officer.
A dog is an animal, so I guess you would say that, but the reason why it says it's a dog is because it precludes things like rabies with fox and things like that. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So, my question is where it's so specific that it's for dogs only, and in fact, Jim mentioned it was for dogs only. I took liberty of going back and looking at his expense reports for a time when he was here. And there are actually approved expense reports for when Mr. Benson went to water cats. So he, I have nothing against cats, I think it's fine. But again, this is about being specific and being very ready to respond to a situation like this. and also the use of the taxpayers' money. So, you know, Jim Benson charges 95 miles to go and water a cat, okay, to water somebody's cat. But it's a dog officer. So, are you okay with that?
So, may I
Go ahead.
answer that? Are you aware of the situation with the cats?
No,
You are aware that we approved that?
I'm not aware of that, and I don't know why you would.
I'm just explaining that. It's one of them circumstances that we approved. It wasn't just, hey, somebody's out of town, go water their cats. There was a certain situation with an elder lady for various reasons I won't get into that we approved. It wasn't just go water somebody's cat. It was the right thing to do for various reasons.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's great that you're doing the right thing to do. But to me, it doesn't feel like you did the right thing for me.
I understand.
Is your specific complaint against the animal control officer?
Pretty much.
Okay, so, you know, I'm noting what you're saying, and I guess the board needs to sit down with the animal control officer and listen to what he has to say about it.
Right.
I'm only hearing your side here tonight,
Right.
and I appreciate that, but, we need to hear both sides, and,
Absolutely.
you know, if we
Right.
should set up another, meeting with the animal control officer, and it's a public meeting, so you can come, but I don't want it to turn into a shouting match between the two of you. You have to be
No.
civil and not, you know, round
So-
things up.
So
But that's what we need to do. We have a public hearing going on here tonight too, so I mean,
Right.
you know, you made it very clear that the animal control officer failed in several areas, according to your opinion,
Right,
and we're noting that,
okay.
okay?
The other thing I wanna make
We
clear.
did have a meeting with Jim and Mark were on Zoom,
Right.
and we did discuss the same issue. You weren't at that meeting.
No.
but we did have, they both spoke.
So I wanna make it perfectly clear, this is the second time I've heard about it being civil. And I don't think I've ever given any reason for anybody to believe that I've been anything but civil. So I wanna make sure that we understand that my being direct is not being rude.
No, it's not, but I mean, we could condense it.
Well, we could, but I haven't seen any action, so far. So the other piece I wanna answer your question is that this is not strictly about the dog control officer, this is about policy. This is about an ordinance that was not followed. And this is about an ordinance that potentially could, and probably most likely will, be updated so that it's more contemporary, so that we'll avoid these situations. We learn from this. I'm not gonna just sit back and say, well, you know, this is just how it is. I don't want this to happen to anybody else again. And I think that there can be stronger policies and procedures in place should it happen again.
Well, then my suggestion is that you send us something that you think should be done, and we can take a look at it.
Right, well,
I mean, we appreciate the public input, you know, but we wanna be constructive, so if you've got better ways or better things that should be in our ordinance, then send them.
yeah,
see.
well, I can certainly do that. I can also bring it to town meeting, which would be another option for me, which I'm thinking of pretty carefully. But until we get through the process of whether there was a problem or not, you can't fix a problem unless you recognize it. So that's what I'm here for. And twice, the first meeting I heard, there's no problem, anything like this. There clearly is a problem. You know, regardless of whether or not he was authorized to go and spend town money to water cats or not, is the point. The point is that it's outside of the responsibility. So, if that's the responsibility, in the language of the bylaw, there should be language that says in there that the board of selectmen can use at their discretion the dog officer for X purpose. You know, simple like that, making sure that this is tighter than it is. So, you know, if a lot of the different things I see in here, you know, there are a lot of expenses that could probably be reduced. I was wondering, I know that this is a new dog officer, and it says that several people were interviewed for the job. Were any of those people residents of Swanton?
I believe so.
I think so.
Okay.
But didn't bring experience at Jim.
You could call it, came down to qualification, so.
Okay, cool. Because it is expensive when he has to drive from North Hero, there where he's not a Swanton
And we took
resident.
that into consideration there.
So that's fine. And just when I see things as a resident and taxpayer, budget's going over, it's clearly over every year. I think it could be done better. I would also comment and ask the question, have you ever considered having the animal control officer come under the police department?
Police department
We
is
don't.
only contracts for us, we don't run the police department. Swan Village Police Department, we only contract through them, we don't run them. It'd be no different if we hire Franklin County Sheriff,
Police department's run by the village, not
village
the
is
town.
not us.
Right,
We don't
no, I know
contract.
that.
So we couldn't take our town
Right.
animal control officer and put him with the village, under the village police department. It's two different entities.
Yeah, so isn't St. Albans. Yeah, Jim Benson happens to be the dog officer for St. Albans, and that comes under the police.
It's what?
It comes under the police in St.
But
Albans.
St. Albans is different. St. Albans is one, not two.
It is St. Albans City and St. Albans Town,
Yeah, two different things.
just like village
Two
and
different
town.
animal
It's
control
not the
officers.
same though.
I dispatched for them for 12 years. It's two different animal control officers. And the city animal control officer was the only employee of St. Albans City until they had the contract with St. Albans Town. They no longer have the contract with St. Albans Town, so the animal control officer for the town does not belong to the city as an
That's
employee.
Okay. But they do report to the police.
They report to their designated police department.
Correct. So whatever it may be, the calls still come in and they're triaged by the police.
Not for town anymore. The town animal control officer is a town employee, not a Franklin County Sheriff's employee.
Okay, so looking at other communities, and I've done the research on this, the majority of them in the area, the animal control officer reports to the police. And there's reasons for that. So when you call 911, it's recorded. Everything else goes right through the police channels. They're trained. Obviously, the police can help them handle a difficult situation that they might come up against. Also, our town, whether it be town or city, we have a canine officer, clearly experienced with dogs. So for a matter of efficiency, to me, it would make sense that if I have a problem with a dog, I'm either gonna call the police or 911. I'm not gonna go to my directory of my annual report and find his phone number. Because my last question was, is that his personal cell phone number, or is that a phone number that's owned by the town?
It's his personal cell phone number as far as I know.
Yeah, that's not good.
So you think we should add expenses to give him the town's cell phone?
Yeah.
So should we all have a cell phone too?
So selectmen should all have cell phone too?
Yeah,
I don't think that's a wise choice, but that's just my opinion.
well, I think that it's a
But
waste of money.
just to
sending
back up real
cats,
quick,
you know.
if you truly had an emergency, true emergency, you would call 911. You wouldn't worry about finding the animal control officer's phone number. If it was a true emergency. I mean, it's just like if someone had an accident, it's the same difference.
Right, and what do you think they tell me?
Well, if it's a true emergency, I would hope they would respond.
No, they tell me to call the dog officer. It
So
happened.
Depends on the
It
situation.
happened last week.
Yeah.
It happened last week when the house that had that dog
Yeah.
that attacked me and was later put down,
Yeah.
brought another one.
Yeah.
The difference with this one is it's white.
Mhm.
Still same house, same origination. I had sent an email to the board of selectmen, and the response was, it's not doing anything wrong, so we can't do anything. In the email, it specifically said that I want the tags, the rabies checked. And the response was, it's not doing anything wrong. Only until I said that other people may be calling in, did we get Jim Benson to come out and look and find out, in fact, it did not have a registration or tags.
And it was also just barely the limit, the age that it needed to be vaccinated.
It's
So-
over the age that it needs to be vaccinated.
He was given a verbal warning to have it vaccinated, so. And I personally haven't followed up on that, but I don't need to follow up on that. So we
No,
have
you
control.
don't, you don't, but
Yeah.
Jim Benson does.
Yeah.
So that was my other question, is when I see things in his log, how does he follow up? How is that documented? Like, there's a note in here that he spoke to somebody and the person doesn't care. That's all it says.
Okay, I have no idea what's that about, so.
So that's why I think it would be better under the police, because they're pretty good at doing that kind of thing, and they probably already have a system already in place.
I have no idea. Anything else tonight, sir?
No, but I'll be back next time.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. You have anything else for that?
No, but
Retail business, public
You wanna go back to Jim? 'Cause
oh, sure.
oh, Jim.
Oh, there he is. Hey, Jim.
So, yeah, you ready for my report? June 2021. 6-1, a dog first dog in the park. There was no marks on the dog or the veterinarian. 6-2, there was abandoned dog, 18 church. It was unfounded. Person moved and came back and got the dog later. Dog at large, 36, Canada. Couldn't find the dog or the owners, and the owners weren't home. So I think the dog had made it back home by then. 93 Hog Island, barking dog. And you have no license or vaccination. Then there was another Hog Island dog at large. Vicious dog first person. 6-6, 21. 6-7, 124 South River, dog hit by car and was deceased when I got there. And the citizen buried the dog in his backyard. And then later on I found the owners and told. 6-12, on 32nd Street, 2 abandoned dogs. It was unfounded. Same thing, they were moving and the brother was going in and feeding the dogs until they picked them up. 6-12, 2021, I had a quarantine check in Richford. 6-13, 2021, 26 Glen Ridge for a found dog, unlicensed, was found by the chip and the dog. 6-15, went back to Richford for another quarantine check. 6-16, apartment B, found dog, I was at work, so Shelly Campbell picked up the dog on Brooklyn and returned it to their owner. 6-18, 23 Greenbridge, dog versus dog, no license. 6-24, 14 Hog Island, dog at large. 6-28, 56 Russell, welfare check on horses. 6-28, 21 York, unlicensed dog. 6-28, 2021, 16 River Street for chicken welfare check.
Hey, Jim, this
Anybody have questions on those?
is Mark, I got 2 for you. Can you elaborate on the welfare check on the horses and the chickens, please? What caused you to do that? Being
Yeah, the horse had a blanket on it, but it looked like a blanket and it was 80 degrees. So the lady was concerned because the horse was so skinny and was wearing a blanket in the middle of the summer. What it was to keep bugs off, so it was netting basically. Pretty common, I guess, for horses to wear this. And then also the horse was 36 years old, and that's why it was so skinny. And then what was the other one?
the chicken.
Chickens?
Yeah.
Yeah, the chickens, the lady said there was too many chickens in a chicken coop and they were out in the heat. I went and checked, chickens were in a chicken coop. Didn't seem like too many to me, and it was actually in the shade. It was on the north side of the house with trees over it. So it seemed like probably the coolest place they could keep the chickens.
Were you in town on them calls, or did you come in Swanton specifically for them?
I came in, I don't remember. I think I came in for them. Yeah, they're all a different day, and like I came over 3 times, I think, that day. One time I was on my way home from work, but yeah.
On 6-6, you got a Hog Island dog at large, vicious dog versus person.
It's Mr. Nolan here.
Oh, that's you.
That's
Oh,
it.
yeah.
That was Mr. Nolan.
Let me see. Anything else?
Jim, on 6-8, you picked up evidence of Swanton PD and brought it to Surroundings PD. What's that all about?
Pardon?
On 6-8, you picked up evidence at the Swanton Police Department, brought it to St. Albans Police Department, what's that all about?
Oh, the kitten may have been, killed by its owner, or the owner's boyfriend or husband, and so it was evidence. Swan Police Department doesn't have any, like a freezer to keep evidence like that, but St. Albans Police Department does. So I took the cat and the evidence is in the freezer at the St. Albans Police Department until they need it.
Is that something that you would normally be doing? Why wouldn't they be doing that between agencies themselves?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I'm saying, is that something you would normally be requested to do? I would think that would be something that would be between agencies. I wouldn't think that you would be involved in that.
Yeah, that's, definitely unusual. The Swanton Police Department called me to let me know about the cat, and they were still working on the case, trying to figure it all out. And then after, they said they had the cat, they wanted to keep it for evidence, and I said, well, there's a freezer at the police department in St. Albans. Of course, they couldn't just leave the town, because then you wouldn't have any police in your town. So I went and picked it up and brought it over there.
So, obviously, my next question, that's the town of Swanton's dying? You built that call to us?
Yeah, for mileage.
I think that's something we have to discuss with Joe.
Yeah, I guess we'll discuss that with PD.
Hey, thank you, Jim.
Also, just so you know, if you call 911, you tell them what town it is, they know my number.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Jim.
Okay, and then, and the cats that I watered, the lady was taken to the hospital by an ambulance. And, so the cats were left alone. She called me from the hospital, and that's why I went over there. I actually went over and watered the cats 10 different times. And I gave the neighbor, $10 so she could buy cat food to take care of them while the lady was in the hospital, out of my own money.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim, for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Anybody, anything else for Jim? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Retail business, public preservation for P.E.G. final alternatives for Lake Street and Palm Shore project.
That's Drew right here.
Okay.
Do you have to set up the projector?
No, we're good to go.
No, we can go right here.
I just need you to tell me when to click.
Alright, actually, could you do me a favor, Elizabeth, just click that,
Okay.
and just,
Oh.
fit one full page. There we go. Alright, is everybody familiar with the project, or do we need a little bit of an introduction? Anybody know the scope?
Short intro.
Short intro, alright, so yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'm Drew Gingras, I'm with our, you can go back one, that's fine. I'm Drew Gingras, I'm with our the consultant team, BHB. We've been working with David, Lise, Betsy, who are here tonight, as well as Reg at the Village, looking at the Lake Street and Quan Shore Road corridor, starting from South River Street and stretching all the way down to the St. Albans border. We responded to this request for proposals, I believe last May timeframe, to put together a scoping report alongside the town and the state of Vermont, as well as what ended up being Rise Vermont, and contributions from the village as well, to look at alternatives to make this corridor a little bit more holistic. As we all may or may not know, it generally is just a 2-lane roadway, but it provides quite a few opportunities for other modes to travel and enjoy. Next slide, please. So just a quick rundown, I'm going to keep this extremely brief. The whole point of us here tonight, the whole point of me being here tonight is ultimately to get in writing and or to approve the selected alternative that we have landed on with the project team from this study. This is not an in-depth look at what we have developed. I'm obviously happy to answer any questions that anybody may have, but I'm not going to step you through every single little intricacy that we found along the way. That has already happened in the multi-month public outreach process that's occurred. I'm just going to step through why this project needed to happen, our preferred alternative, which is what we're here again to seek approval from you for, and then just go over the quick next steps. Next slide. So yeah, just a brief rundown. Our project team, as I mentioned, consisted of David, Reggie, Elise, Betsy, and then on the consultant side, myself, Drew Gingras, is the project manager. Also had contributions from Jennifer Conley, my boss and our Director of Transportation Systems, and then Annabelle Daly, our Transportation Designer on the project. Here's a brief look back at the scope and schedule. So we got under contract with the project last summer. We kicked it off with the project team here in the town in October. We stepped through a number of things that are necessary for this type of scoping report. We do a full look at the project corridor. We evaluate the existing conditions. We look at natural resources along the corridor, what we can expect for impacts to those items as well as permitting. From there, we hear from the public. That's our first meeting, our local concerns meeting. And that was all done over Zoom, obviously during the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw input from folks there to further educate our purpose and need of the project and then what we'd actually seek to do throughout the process. We then developed alternatives to potentially implement along the corridor, presented those to the public, got their feedback, worked with the project team to land on a preferred alternative, develop a scoping report. Final public meeting is today, and then from there, we'll seek to finalize the scoping report and deliver that to the town for your review next month. So a quick rundown of the project purpose. Why are we doing this at all? Well, the Swanton Lake Street McQuam Shore Road project really sought to identify and evaluate alternatives to improve safety and mobility for all modes along this kind of combined corridor rather than referring to it as two streets. And improve conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists as well as motorists. And specifically, we took a look at a way to provide a safe and separate space for those more exposed users, for people on foot and by bike, and also to evaluate options that will calm traffic speeds, as it was a noted concern along the project. And so to kind of reiterate those, we have the project needs: improve the corridor safety, enhance mobility and safety for more exposed users, and develop solutions to reduce traffic speeds. So a purpose and needs statement really defines what we then seek out to evaluate for alternatives. So that's why these are so critical. And now, I don't know if anybody has a snare drum, the drum roll for our preferred alternative. So we ultimately, to look at the process, we developed 6 alternatives. We narrowed those down to 3 with the project team. From there, we presented those to the public. We put forth a poll and a vote. And from that, we developed a majority in support of our paved shared use path alternative along the corridor. So this would seek to construct an 8-foot wide shared use path. It's on the narrow side, but we're comfortable with proposing that given the traffic volumes and anticipated non-motorized user volumes along the corridor, as well as taking into account the natural resources and then, of course, the right-of-way along the corridor. And then, as I touched on, we wanted our alternative to be able to create opportunities for traffic calming features as well along the corridor, given the noted concern over speeding. So this is, but just real quick. So this is just a general cross section of what it would look like, edge of pavement to edge of pavement. We currently have 24 feet. From there, we would seek to construct a shared use path with a paved surface. There was also conversation around an aggregate surface versus a paved surface. We landed on a paved surface for the project with 5 feet of separation in the form of a grass buffer. Then we've shown kind of, approximate utility locations and right-of-way lines to give you kind of a feel for what this would look like relative to the town right-of-way along the corridor. If you can step forward, please, Elizabeth. So these, I realize, might be a little bit hard to see, but these kind of provide a sheet-by-sheet look starting at the southernmost edge of the project limits, being with St. Albans, and then moving north. You can see north is right. This will be updated on every page as we shift. But this is, we can click through these pretty rapidly, but this just kind of gives you an idea of the level of impact. These bright pink lines, pardon me, those on the other side of the room, are the approximate right-of-way that we would obviously want to do our best to stay within to avoid any potential acquisitions. You'll see as we get up towards Lake Street, the right-of-way in fact narrows, which will produce some challenges. That's a future need to address, but this is just showing here's what the potential impact of an 8-foot shared use path along the corridor would provide. And then as I touched on, and then in an effort to limit potential total cost of the project, we ultimately found out that the Swanton Village Electric Department owns the vast majority of the utilities along this corridor. Generally, that was somewhat unique. Generally, they're privately owned utilities, and thus if you want to relocate them, you have to have the utility pay for them, assuming they're in the right of way. That's how it happens. But it became apparent that the village owns about 90% of the utility poles in the corridor, and the cost of the project would fall on them to relocate if it came to that. So we sought to change sides of the roadway for the shared use path along the corridor, and that would in turn also create median islands and crossings for users, which would also create a traffic calming benefit along the corridor and an attempt to slow those speeds. So we've attempted, as we click through, Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind, we've attempted to space those out with other kind of contextually sensitive and appropriate traffic calming measures, and we noticed when we did our first site walk that there was a speed feedback sign out there, and it seemed, we gathered from local concerns meeting that was seeing positive results along the corridor. So we sought to basically space out equally distanced along the corridor some combination of crossings which will allow for median refuge and cause a horizontal deflection in the roadway, which is a proven metric to slow motorists, and it is contextually appropriate for a roadway like this, rural with a speed limit of 40 miles per hour and a traffic volume around 1,000 vehicles per day. And then we've noted just a few other things on each slide. We have called out it again, this is more graphical than anything, potential utility pole conflicts. There are inevitably going to be a few, as well as opportunities for speed feedback signs along the corridor. So we mind continuing to click forward, and this is kind of more the same, and then we ultimately arrive at the northeast end of the project where we would then tie into South River Street, and maybe down the line if we do get into evaluating this as a potential for construction, we'd seek to develop and improve connections to the rest of town. And you can kind of see again what I was referring to with the slightly narrower right of way along Lake Street. We are limited to a 3-rod right of way along Lake Street, whereas along Mafon Shore it's a 4-rod right of way, so that's actually 64 feet narrowing to about 49 feet along the corridor. So that's why you saw that getting a little bit closer to the right of way at times along Lake Street. So the next steps would be to seek approval for the preferred alternative, which we would then identify in the report and allow the project team to proceed with the project into the next steps. Whatever that might entail, garnering support for potential funding, seeking, opportunities to potentially have this built. And that's that. I'm happy to. What's that?
I'm trying to get between screens and showed off something else.
I think there is one more slide, but I believe it is just a general questions and comments slide. I already have my contact information, as well as David's. I realized that was a whirlwind tour of a 4.5 mile corridor, but I got the thumbs up when I said I was going to keep it brief, so that's exactly what I did. But yeah, if there's any engineering specific questions or questions about this study effort, the project team, how we arrived at this, I'm happy to answer those. Or if they're more appropriate for David, Lisa, or Betsy, by all means.
So I guess you mentioned that it does cross the road.
That was, yes.
Do you know roughly how many times it
I
crosses?
believe it's 4. And I guess on that topic, it's worth noting that this is in and of itself a concept. So that can certainly change if we get into engineering design, as well as the side of the road. It could be, we sought to mitigate utility impacts and wetland impacts based on where we put the path. We get into construction, we realize there's actually a potentially bigger headache with property proximity here. Maybe we keep it over here. So that could all change.
Do you know if people will actually cross the road?
The path would end.
Right, I mean, but would they just keep walking down the road, or do you, is?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
I lose the trail is there.
Yeah, when you have a trail that's 5 feet off the road and gives you all the space in the world to do what you need to do, I would hope.
I asked, because I'm not sure I would, honestly, I would probably just keep trucking until it caught up again on that side of the road.
I think they would cross.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions that, if you don't mind, Julie, thank you for going through that. I was able to attend the first thing where we talked about
Local concerns.
width of the
Sir, I'm sorry, can you identify yourself so I can?
Sure, I'm Marty.
You're Marty, okay.
I live actually along where you're gonna put the path, so.
Respect that.
So specifically on slide 4 of 10 and slide 1 of 10, you have 2 transitions. One going from east to west and one from west to east.
Okay.
And it actually transitions from, as you're going south, it transitions just after the bend from Lake Street on the Mafon Shore. And then about 1.5 miles later, it transitions from west to east. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think that we can all assume that the fewer potential vehicle contacts is safer. And so adding those two crossings will increase the likelihood for vehicle contact for bicycles and pedestrians. In addition to that, on the west side, where in between those two crossings, there are 25 different driveways across in that space. And on the east side, there are only 13. So again, the difference in the potential contacts of pedestrians and bicycles with vehicles, which I think is the predominant safety concern, vehicles, correct?
Conflict points, sure.
Yeah, or conflict points or contact points or whatever you want to call that. And so that, I would think, and maybe this will come out as part of the engineering, or I don't know if you're asking for approval for the path that
We're
happens.
Asking approval for the shared use path concept in earnest.
Including the four crossings and the location of the four
Yeah.
crossings, because I really think that, you know, when and I've got to live in two different locations on the Palm Shore Road. Coming around the bend is that turn has some speed mitigation built into it just because of the way the turn is, and so that first bump is which you have, the first crossing, I'm sorry, is significantly away from that, so people can see and view that. So I would encourage you to look very, very closely at that. The other thing that I would think would be for you to look at is that on the west side of McQuam Shore Road, you'll see a significant more vegetation that is going to be in the bike path. And that vegetation would have to be removed. So that vegetation is clearly, a lot of it is within the 250-foot upland zone of the shoreline protection area, right? And as you cross the road and add that additional, what is it, 40 feet? 4 rods is what, 60 feet?
4 rods about 60.
60 feet. So that 60 feet will take and move a bunch of that bike path outside of that that upland zone. So as you're going through that, I think it would be important to see that. And then the other thing, the last thing that I observed, and I just got these today, to look at them, was that as you're traveling south on the Palm Shore, the west side, the driveways are shorter and more concealed than the driveways that are on the east side. And so if you're a car coming down the driveway, you have a lot better visibility to what is potentially on the bike path and the path.
Sure.
And if you're on a bike or you're walking, the visibility is far superior to see the driveways instead of people. You've got a very short amount of distance between when somebody gets in their car and gets in the Palm Shore Road for a vast majority of the residents on the west side than you do the east side. And that's, so I would, you know, it just seems that would allow for a lot fewer, I call them contact points, you call them something else, but than transitioning it back and forth.
Okay.
And so I don't know if the plan that is being approved tonight is going to include all those crossings, or if that's gonna come later and is gonna be part of public comment as part of the engineering. if you're asking for approval, I'd like you to be specific about what you're asking for approval on.
I guess it's not so much me that I think it's more the project team that is seeking approval for this study.
Well, you're standing up there, so.
Okay,
who else is out here? All you get up there. Yeah.
I mean, we're, I guess to that point, the draft report and thus the draft preferred alternative has been reviewed by the project team and there were no comments. So I don't know if they would be interested in heeding your comments tonight and requesting that we do change that preferred alternative. That would be more up to the project team than me. But as the engineer and consultant, I understand your feedback. Would tend to, it's important to note that any number of things is to determine how we lay out something like that. I understand what you're saying with conflict points, and there is absolute merit in that idea. As a practitioner, for what it's worth, I am less concerned, but in the sheer idea of minimizing those conflict points, what you said is absolutely valid. The safety of those conflict points, again, I have less concerns about those, like the 24 versus the 13. I think there's somewhat moot there, but based purely on volume, you're correct that there are more on one side than the other. The risk of those conflict points, I guess, is what I'm saying, I am not as concerned about.
Okay, what about the crossing as a conflict point?
The crossing, I think, there's, in addition to the crossing itself, it establishes that this is not just a corridor for cars, and those crossings were deliberately placed in areas with perfectly adequate sightlines and advanced to enhance crossing treatments such as refuge islands and signs and pavement markings. Of course, anytime you cross the street, you are putting yourself in the street versus staying on one side of the street. But that is more also about, it was brought up that this is a gateway road, this is a roadway into town, this is a scenic byway as well. People gawk and lose their concentration if there were more elements. I'm not saying let's put people in their way so they pay attention, but if you establish the road as, okay, wow, there's pedestrian crossings here, that means there's gonna be pedestrians here. There's warning signs for the trail crossings, that means there's a trail here. That means there are gonna be other people utilizing this space, so I need to be more aware of that. Of course, if you minimize any conflict points, you're gonna mitigate all of those concerns, but there are actually, I think, added benefits of having those elements. But those crossings themselves would absolutely be potentially further evaluated in an engineering design. This is just the concept itself. So are you approving each one of those crossings exactly where they are? No.
Okay,
We're approving the shared use path concept.
So where and how does that get done? Who approves where the crossing points happen, and when does that get done, if we're not doing that here?
I would say that would be part of the next phase if the select board decides to go ahead with this. When it's engineered, they would have better calculations on where those should be located.
Okay, and that would be available for public comment?
They would have to have meetings.
Yeah.
And the crossings also serve to mitigate the speed because when you have, like in front of the post office, you have a bunch of course when you're crossing, it flashes a light, that tends to.
Yep, living on two different locations on the Shore Road, I'm clearly aware of, some of the speed stuff that happens there, and I think crossings are one of the mechanisms to mitigate speed. I think the best one is the police officer sits in the water. I think that's one of the best mitigations going. But I applaud the team for taking on the safety of that because I live there, I lose it. I got a dog, I ride a bike, and all that stuff. And so being able to focus on safety and to reduce as much as possible the conflict points. See, I'm learning. I think should be taken quite seriously.
That's
and I also think that there's quite a bit of discussion about the quality of the lake in the Palm Bay. And I think having a smaller vegetation impact inside of the shoreland, the upland zone is, I think should also be a real consideration that happens for this project. Because on the west side, you're gonna be inside of it a lot. On the east side, a lot less.
We do have a question.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, and that, the next step is the engineering phase. In that engineering phase, the engineer will look at all that stuff as far as the wetlands, they'll deviate that, and what's what and where, and in those designs. And we went through it when we did, a few years ago, when we did the MBU sidewalk they're working on now. It was the same process. We had someone bring us ideas, and then we went to the engineering, and then he gave us a couple of designs to choose from there. So basically, the next step is the engineering firm to design it, and then they come back with how much money it's gonna cost us, and that's, and all that stuff.
Right.
So that's basically the next
We
step
have,
of the process.
conceptual costs at this stage, but yeah, until you actually get a full engineering plan design and
Yeah.
engineering estimate, that's what.
We do have a question in the chat. What about mailbox locations?
I'm gonna go ahead and punt that to the future engineering design phase. I'm not sure, I'm not sure really what the expectation would be for a response there, but again, this is a concept. The concept being a shared use path along this shared use.
I would say the mailbox is still gonna be at the roadside.
Their mailboxes will still be accessible.
Yeah.
Or get a pillbox.
Yeah.
A question over here.
Yeah, at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the cost, and I just wondered did you redo the estimated cost, and can you tell us that for this final alternative?
Yeah, the estimated cost of the shared use path concept from start to finish is about $3.5 million.
So this one, 3.5 million.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't hear that.
3.5 million, Earl, did you hear that?
3.5 million?
Yep.
Okay.
That includes design, contingency, utility relocation, construction, permitting.
4.5 miles?
Mitigation, yep.
And how many taxes go up again?
Can't answer that one.
Probably 3.425 if you take
So-
two crosses.
So you said the village pays for utility?
The utilities are village owned,
Right.
so therefore, similar to something that you own, if you want to relocate it, you would pay that.
So
So-
in addition to 3.5 million, the village would pay?
Nope, that includes that.
That includes it, okay. The other question I have, and maybe you don't have this specific, is about the speed feedback signs. There's several of them. Are you thinking like the one that the police department has, that type of thing?
That it
Or
could be
just-
any,
Okay,
this is, not that specific.
okay.
Again, trying to conceptualize traffic calming improvements, we evaluated speed tables, speed humps, chicanes, realigning the roadway. When you look at all those and you look at the context of this roadway, the things that we developed and also the farm traffic, the known truck traffic, the speed limit of 40, all of these things amount to kind of what we thought is the best improvements and the most effective improvements based on studies that have been done by the Federal Highway Administration, local municipalities, speed feedback signs, and medians were what we came up with as far as what those speed feedback signs are, how big they are, what they actually do give you for feedback. That would be all engineered. I wanted to put 4 in, Marty. You said it. Your driveway's
So they're extremely effective at speed control.
But go to the one in Maruski, it's not effective.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's, I don't think we're looking at one that big. 4?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You guys, any questions?
I just want to thank Drew and Annabelle and Jan for the great work.
Absolutely.
And they were very receptive to public input at the meetings that you prior to tonight.
I guess with that, I don't know if you guys want to do a formal motion or how you want to. It seems like folks are at least in support of the idea of this, or maybe that'll come in future correspondence from you, David, but without any other questions, I'm happy to respond to anything else, otherwise I'll get out of your way.
Where do we go from here?
That's my next question. So do we need to vote on something here or no?
It's up to you. I did email the presentation of the sauce. And, so if you want to digest it for a while, and then the presentation, you can have it because if you heard what the total price tag would be. And I mean, there would be some, but I don't think we cover everything. The other thing that was mentioned was, doing it in phases. It's in all of this.
How much money do we have into this project right now?
Especially when you get a grant.
11,000 we use our
For
own,
like
the rest is grant. Yeah.
But we have 11,000
11,000.
on that.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do a scoping study, you kind of have the idea that you're gonna move forward with it somehow, some way, or you don't do the scoping study.
Yeah.
It may be a phased, very phased.
Right, for any type of road improvement project like this, if you want to get grant money from the consultants, you have to get a scoping first. In order to qualify, even apply for a grant for construction. So,
The scoping study is a process to get to the
that's
actual
right.
implementation of the project. It doesn't mean that just because we're handing you a scoping study to say, yes, great, we love it, let's approve it, doesn't mean that it's an implementation stage at all. It doesn't mean you're approving a $3.5 million project, by no means. It's just a study, it's a process that has to happen before we get to the next step.
Absolutely.
So you're not saying I'm approving $3.5 million project, you're just saying you support the scoping piece of the project moving forward. And then there's the engineer process and so on and so forth. This is just the starting point to the process.
But the bottom dollar is 3.5 million.
And that could change,
Higher
depending
or
on
lower?
I mean,
I'm just curious. I mean, I don't
you
even
never know, I mean.
you never know. I mean, look at lumber prices right now, right?
I know about
I mean, everything's gonna go up and everything's gonna go down. Gas prices, we do the same thing. So that's the same thing with any
Well,
construction
I don't think
project.
that's really, I understand that. I guess the question that I would have as a select board member, and I wasn't involved with this when this all started, and I'm all for these paths and all that stuff, but we have other issues that might be more realistic to get accomplished than this, and where do we wanna put our resources? You know, we have the rail trail, and we have 4th Street, you know, how much resources do we
We
have?
also have to remember, we're paying for the sidewalk in the MU right now too, every year for the next.
Right, but this is just a study.
Yeah, I understand, it's just, yeah.
Well, and I think there's funding opportunities to support all of these projects that you just brought up. I mean, the town and the village are not gonna pay for every single project that comes through here. There's grant funding, and if you're not paying for the full MVU sidewalk.
No.
So, I mean, there's funding available to support all of these projects moving forward, along with the rail trail and everything else. It's not something, it's just a matter of finding the funding and having someone apply for the funding.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Drew will give us some funding options, recommendations, and,
So, yeah, I guess one thing to note too is like, what the final deliverable of this process is a study report. And what that report will do is summarize all of our findings. In that report, we'll have cost estimates, you know, we've broken out opportunities for how to implement the project differently. If you wanted to do a segmented implementation, how much it would cost you to do just Lake Street or just Moquam to St. Albans or whatever it might be. As well as what if you wanted to do an aggregate surface, because it saves you cost up front, how much would it cost to transition to a paved surface? So this is more just approving this particular concept within the report as the preferred concept is all we're looking to do.
There were concerns brought up here tonight about the crossings,
Accomplish here, yeah.
and I believe those are legitimate concerns myself. You know, I'm just taking me, if I was going down that road, I don't know if I'd wanna go across, you know, 4 times. Doesn't seem like the safest way to make a pedestrian trail or sidewalk. I mean, minimize the crossings would be the best, unless there's something particular on the other side that we want people to see or do.
well,
My,
there's
my,
power
under- my
line.
understanding is that what we're asking for is that the concept
And the backhoes are not arriving tomorrow.
That's right,
We're a
absolutely.
long, long way from the backhoes.
Sorry.
And
Concept.
so I think, you know, what Drew has presented and what we have done to date is say, we have a real opportunity, and we've spoken with our friends in St. Albans, they're on board with this, we have this resource. I know one of the things Reg, you know, in looking at perhaps doing a segment of this, Reg was saying, you know, the Lake Street to the beach doesn't have as many driveways and the town may have resources that could really cut the cost and sort of do this first part.
Well, that's nice of Reg, but he is the village.
Yeah.
I think the idea was that
Right.
perhaps doing it in segments, we don't have to do the whole thing. We do know that our neighbors to the south are also working on this, and they're no closer to the backhoes than we are. But what we're here for is to say, we think it's a good idea, and we're not, we're gonna support it. Then see what goes next, where it goes next.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
So, you just wanna make a motion?
I'll make the motion that we continue, except the, what's the word I wanna use? Help me out here.
Scope and studies.
Thank you.
Scope and study.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
So
Let's go forward.
what exactly is this motion to?
Support the concept.
Except the concept.
Yeah, just to continue
Of
going
what
forward.
you just.
No dollars, you're not committing any dollars.
No,
Or time.
we're okay with the concept of what he's designed, I mean, not exactly what he's designed, but the concept of putting a bike path
Excuse me.
down the farm.
Okay,
Shared
so-
use.
Shared use path, okay, there we go, walk, bike, whatever you wanna call it.
Alright, so once that, if we approve that, we accept the concept, then what happens? Does,
Well, they'll
is
go
that the end
forward
of
and
it?
finish the report with different recommendations like Drew just mentioned.
Okay,
And that'll come back to the select board.
And we're gonna have to pay for that.
It's paid for. It's already
It's
paid.
already paid.
It's all done. That part's paid for.
I see, so if we don't approve the concept, then they gotta go back to the drawing board and we gotta pay them more.
Right.
Right.
No, that's not true.
What if it gets you to approve it, Earl?
Yes.
Hey, guys. Hard.
There was a local concerns meeting where concerns were meant to be brought up, and I don't mean to discount anybody because it's always nice to hear from people, but there is a process in place. The process was to do a local concerns meeting. This is a presentation of the deferred alternative that came out of the local concerns meeting. So I think we can take the comments, but all this is a draft report and
That's right.
it's saying, do you in concept
Mhm.
approve this draft report? When we get to design and construction,
Exactly.
then we'll dig deeper and
Worry
and
about the
really dig
crosswalks
in
and
and
the
look
roads
and
and
worry about
worry
this
about
thing. And I don't mean to discount
No,
anybody,
no,
but
thank you
there
for
is a
clarifying.
The
process.
concerns that came forward at the meeting, this is how they addressed it, about
Yes.
crossing it in the roads and where possibly they.
Yes.
So you got a
So I got a motion, you wanna second it?
I will second that.
Alright, any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Okay.
Thank you. Very
You're welcome.
much.
Thank you for all of you that were involved in that. Continue to be involved. Okay. Yeah. Hey, guys, if you're gonna chit chat, can I ask you to go out there? Just, I'm not trying to be rude, just so we can all hear. Thank you. Discuss the cannabis opt-in with Crystal Lim and Amy Brewer. What's that all about?
Welcome, ladies.
Hey,
Betsy.
Yeah.
Greta, do you want to share your screen, or you want me to share my screen?
Whatever is easier, I'm happy to share, but you have to enable me to share.
I will enable you to share. So see if that works, ma'am?
Okay, thank you. Yes, it does. Thanks.
Yes. One for Dave. Oh, another screen.
Go front to back, flip it over, come back to front. Is that what we're doing?
You are going front to back.
That was like,
It's nice to see you.
okay, it's like front to back, the front, nice.
Later the evening, and we'll try to trick you.
I know if you're trying to check that we're big.
Yes. So, I'm Crystal Lampman, and I'm the Executive Director of Franklin County Caring Communities. We are, the, community coalition that serves Franklin and Grand Isle counties around substance use prevention. My cohort.
I am Amy Brewer. I coordinate the Franklin Grand Isle Tobacco Prevention Coalition. And then our partner is Greta Brunswick. Greta, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Greta.
Okay. So, the purpose of us coming to speak with you tonight isn't to advocate for or against retail cannabis sales within the community. It's really just to have a discussion about how we protect youth. So like all of the legal substances, we are very concerned about youth use rates. So Swanton's always been a fantastic partner whenever we have talked about concerns, and we've been really working hard in this community to bring youth voice to the forefront with the Vermont Youth Project, to give youth opportunities for engagement with our rec department. Nicole and Betsy have done a phenomenal job making sure that there are offerings for our kids to do in this community. So we just really wanted to talk about the things that we can assist with to help protect youth within the community.
Yeah, so I can jump in. So like I said, we're going to talk mostly about youth. And I just want to make sure that we're talking about how cannabis may or may not impact youth. So this is just a few facts about cannabis. I say cannabis, most people think pot or marijuana, all the same thing. So just, I'm going to say cannabis. But we know that cannabis use does have some specific risks for youth, and those include for youth who use it, challenges with memory and learning, challenges with motor coordination, reaction time. We also know that the earlier kiddos experiment with any substance, and cannabis is part of that, the higher the risk for addiction, heavy use, memory, learning, and also the risk of using other substances like alcohol and tobacco. The three work together.
And the youth brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. That prefrontal cortex is the last thing to develop. So it definitely can impact that. And that's why when we discuss youth, we go above that age of 21 to really 25. And we talk a lot about misuse in addition to use.
Greta, can you move it forward, please? Thank you. So what we're all about is helping youth get through adolescence with that healthy brain, right? So we're looking at what we can do. And one of the things that we're a little concerned about retail cannabis doing is normalizing use. So they think it's we oftentimes hear youth say it's a plant, it's organic, it's fine, it's natural. And so with tobacco, we know that doesn't work for that substance either. So when they see retail, they may be more likely to think that it's a normal thing to do. And for youth who see a lot of stores or images or advertising, they may be more likely to use, thinking it's more normal for them to do. And so there's good evidence that perceived normalization is impacted by advertising, how much, where they see advertising, if there's advertising near their school. If they have to walk by stores and advertising on the way to school every day, that increases their risk of experimenting and therefore using. And they may overestimate how many of their peers use. Youth who think everybody's doing it may be more likely to also do it. And they may underestimate harm. Over the past 20 years, I think you probably all know, we've done a really good job at explaining that tobacco kills people. Kids get this 100%, almost, above 90% kids get this, and cigarette use went down. And Greta, if you would mind moving forward one more time. We've done a really great job with that with tobacco. They don't have the same perceived risk for, and that'll be the next slide, but for cannabis, so they may be more likely or more confused about its harm. I just want to give you a little bit of context. So I know the colors are hard to see. The top line is, I can't even see that.
Is perceived parental disapproval.
There we go, thank you, you're welcome. So as parents, as kids think their parents don't care as much,
The middle line, I also can't read.
So the middle line is received peer disapproval.
Why don't you do this, please?
No problem. The next line is perceived risk of harm. And then that last line is past 30-day use. So as you can see, over the last 6 years, unfortunately, those perceptions of harm essentially and have gone down. In other words, do my parents care, do my kids care, or my peers care, or do I think it's gonna harm? Those all went down and then use goes up. So, and if you're not familiar with the WireBAS, that's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It's given every 2 years in all of our high schools here in Vermont. And Franklin County has always tended to trend higher than the state averages. So that's been concerning.
One more, Greta, please. I also wanted to give you this context. No, go back, please.
Sorry.
That's okay, thank you. This is kind of where you can see the changes in alcohol, cannabis, tobacco, and then that really steep upturn at the end there from 11% to 29%. That's vaping, which we've been talking about a lot in the past. And that's important. But as you can see, alcohol use is that top line. It's coming down. It's trending down. This is since 2001. This is Franklin County data. And cigarette use is that bottom line. It came down a lot. We did a really good job as a state really talking about that substance. And then
the blue line is cannabis use, and you can see that we had a downward trend for a while, then we had a little blip, and then we started back with the downward trend, and now we're back on the rise. Right. Then the last is the vaping, which is concerning because youth have figured out how to vape cannabis as well.
Could use one more slide, please. Thank you. Which is what this is. The data shows that, as vapes were coming on the scene, not that many people vaped marijuana or cannabis. By 2019, the youth were much more likely to use a vape device, which they all had in their pockets because of the nicotine that they were vaping. They're now more likely to vape cannabis as well. So there's one device that they all have in their pocket that they now can use for both substances. They think it's a lower risk of harm. They think their parents don't care. And they think their peers are all doing it, and that's leading to a little bit of an increase. So one of the things we wanted to just be really clear is, as you're having this conversation about retail cannabis, maybe you're not, but as you're thinking about potentially having that conversation, that you keep all of this in mind, because your choices and where these things might be located and the advertising that they might use might cause those numbers to go up.
And so we've provided a link to our Planning for Prevention guide that we developed with Northwest Regional Planning. And I know that you have a physical copy of the guide. I have new ones being printed with the most up-to-date data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and I'll make sure that you all get a copy of that. But those, the two websites, you can find a live link with the updated version. And there's a lot of really great information in here in policy, sample policy language. So, if you were gonna look at content neutral ad restrictions and types of policy changes that, we could implement to protect youth, we do have samples of those within this document. And so we kind of turn things over to Greta at this point because she is the master of the planning portion of things.
Hi, so I wanted to just give an overview of Act 164 and how it specifically applies to municipal regulation of cannabis. So I'm sure most of you know that Act 164 was enacted in 2020 to set up the legal cannabis marketplace. And the intent of the law is to move as much of the illegal cannabis market as possible into the regulated market. And so this next two slides just cover some bullet points highlighting some of the main pieces of legislation. There's a lot to it, so this is just an overview. So it creates the Cannabis Control Board for the purpose of regulating the cannabis marketplace. The Cannabis Control Board is now appointed, but that was a delayed appointment, and so the rulemaking and marketplace setup is delayed. They had their first meeting in May, so things are moving now. Participation in the legal cannabis market will require licensing, so the variety of, in order to operate as a cannabis business, whether you're retail or another type, you do have to get a license and apply for that license through the Cannabis Control Board. Municipalities also have the opportunity to create a local cannabis commission, and so that would allow for them to issue local permits for cannabis establishments and retail if it's allowed in their community. Zoning does apply, so the cannabis establishments are subject to local zoning if it regulates such uses. There are a variety of types of licenses, so there's whether you're a grower or a testing facility or a supplier or retail, it's a variety of different licenses. They each have their own approval process and requirements. A few other just overview provisions from the Act. Only adults over 21 will be allowed entry, sale, and employment at cannabis establishments. There's no public consumption of cannabis. Internet order and delivery is prohibited. There's policies for advertising and packaging, and this is primarily intended to prevent youth access. And so this is outlined, there's provisions outlined in the Act around this, and then also that will be set further by rulemaking by the Cannabis Control Board. And then there's also a social equity provision, which is intended to address the disproportional impact of enforcement of the illegal cannabis historically. And there will be opportunity for applicants to gain access into the marketplace through funding incentives. So now I'm going to talk about how this act applies to municipalities. So there is currently an opt-in for retail or integrated license. So what that means is that when cannabis establishments are allowed to get licensed, any establishment would be allowed to operate in your community as long as it applied all of the local ordinances and rules, zoning regulations, and received the license. Except for retail, unless your community has had a vote at a town meeting by Australian ballot that authorized retail use in your community. So no affirmative vote, no retail cannabis. All the other establishments are allowed regardless. That the opt-in provision is only for retail, and integrated license is a license that you may combine with other types of establishments with retail. And so you can have retailers or integrated licenses or both on a ballot if you so chose. A municipality that hosts any cannabis establishment may establish a cannabis control commission. Like I noted, that would allow you to issue, in addition to the license that would be permitted by the Cannabis Control Board at the state level, it allows you at the municipal level to issue a local permit, which can be conditioned on compliance with local bylaw provisions or an ordinance if you have them. So some of the things, other items the local cannabis control commission can do, that haven't issued, let's say they administer local control licenses, that are conditioned on bylaws or ordinances. They may suspend or revoke control license for violations. And there are, rulemaking by the Cannabis Control Board isn't expected to be done until October at earliest, but we have to stay tuned for those rules as they are going to set further parameters around how the marketplace operates. Perhaps that may include how municipalities can regulate. So there are some limitations set by the Act in terms of how municipalities can regulate cannabis establishments. You cannot prohibit the operation of a cannabis establishment within the municipality through ordinance or bylaw. So you can't have the effect of prohibiting, but you can regulate how it happens. So you can condition the operation of a cannabis establishment on you cannot condition it on any other basis than through the bylaw or ordinance as authorized by statute. And you can't exceed the authority granted to you by law. And so now I wanted to review some ways or options for how municipalities might craft zoning regulations for cannabis establishments or retail establishments specifically. So this will make the presumption that you would define a specific type of retail use for cannabis as opposed to grouping it generally with all retail. Your bylaws likely had a retail use, perhaps you have a few different types of retail uses, but there would be an opportunity to then create a specific retail use for cannabis. And perhaps other types of cannabis establishments, growers or warehousing or other types of packaging facilities. So you can designate an allowed or prohibited, the use as allowed or prohibited by zoning districts. So what district should retail cannabis be allowed in? And so while there are certain types of uses like schools that you would like to buffer from cannabis retail perhaps, there's an argument to me that it should be integrated with other retail commerce rather than relegated to low use and or industrial or less traveled zones. So that's something to consider rather than sort of segregating it, perhaps stigmatizing that type of use to a certain area, integrating it. There's an argument to be made for that. In overlay districts, so if there's not one entire district that's appropriate for cannabis retail, you could choose to set up an overlay district that only encompasses part of an existing zoning district or part of several zoning districts. Prohibiting the retail of cannabis products as an accessory use. So if retail is allowed as an accessory use, you could consider whether cannabis retail is also appropriate for that or not. And then specific development standards. So you have a section of your bylaws that that in addition to other standards that may apply for conditional use or site plan, that create specific standards for that particular use. And so you could do that for retail cannabis. It might look at contract neutral signage or other signage regulations. Perhaps it might regulate the hours of operation. Few other tools, so retail in certain districts in your community might be a permitted use, so you can consider whether you want cannabis retail to be a conditional use in all your zoning districts where they were allowed. And the last two, there's buffer zones that are used commonly for these types of uses around places that have a high concentration of youth. So schools, childcare centers, parks, and the like. And so you could set a buffer zone of a certain distance around that in your zoning bylaws where it would be prohibited to have cannabis retail within that buffer zone. And then the last is outlet density, and so it's setting a distance from each cannabis retail use, so you're limiting the density. You're not going to have a cluster of cannabis retail in one area. There needs to be a certain amount of feet or other distance set between permitted establishments. So that's my summary of the act as it pertains to municipalities. Let me know if you have any questions or going forward. If you do end up opting in for cannabis retail or are interested in otherwise setting up regulations or ordinances around municipal regulations, NRPC is happy to have conversations with you about how to do that and what that might look like in your community. I don't know if Amy or Crystal, you wanted to touch on this slide. There are a few other ways that or things that municipalities can do around protecting youth around cannabis retail.
Sure. So as Greta mentioned, there are regulatory tools around location, density, signage, hours of operation. Those are all things that do protect youth when they're put in place policy-wise. The other thing is point of sale advertising and product placement reduction. A few years ago, the youth that I worked with in this community went around and they looked at all of the advertisements that they saw on a typical walk to school. If that child were to walk that same route to school every day to and from school, and say they saw 10 advertisements in that walk, that over 12 years, adds up to thousands and thousands of advertisements that they see. And we do know that advertisements play a role in youth use. So there are things that we can do around point of sale advertising, product placement reduction, working with our retailers for responsible retailer policies and enforcement, and this is something that we currently do with all of our liquor licensees. Supporting opportunities for skill-based parent training, so
And then advocating, and this is something that all community members can do. This isn't just the policymakers, but this is something that all community members can do. So to support opportunities for parent training and to advocate for evidence-based curricula within the schools. And then the key piece is really strong local leadership, and we've seen that happen in Swanton. I think the Vermont Youth Project is a phenomenal example. It's something that Nicole is very involved in. And it's really making opportunities for youth to be part of the community, so the communities where we all work and play and live. So the next slide is just the timeline of this particular law. And our ask really is like I said, not a yes or no vote. Our ask is simply a pause until we have all of the information in place with the Cannabis Control Board, because that is still very much in motion at this time. Then here's our contact information, and then the last thing I included is just some information about what Caring Communities is. My predecessor, Beth, was phenomenal. With people recognizing her face and knowing who she was, but not necessarily our program, so there's just some information there. And the Franklin Dried Out Tobacco Coalition is our sister coalition, so we work very closely together and in partnership with NRPC. So we thank you for your time this evening. If there's anything that we can offer, please reach out to us. Both Amy and I are available all the time. And we love coming to Swanton and work. I mean, I grew up in Swanton. Amy loves coming to work in Swanton.
And I enjoy working with you ladies.
Presenting this to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greta.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greta. Take care, good night, everyone.
Thank
you.
So discuss 2022 grant aid road program. Here, that must be it. Yeah.
2 meetings ago, I mentioned the similar program that went through this year with conditions that it has to be a hydrologically connected road. You can get money to fix the ditches and shoulders and so forth. This is a new one for the coming year. And it has the same restrictions, but they added one more feature. If it's a gravel road, they would allow fixing the gravel on the road. But I can only think of two that we have.
We only have a gravel roads and a couple.
Yeah,
And
just.
they're not even barely on a class 4 road, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring it to your attention, there's a $12,000 grant
Yeah.
for Swan.
What can the money be used for?
The same thing as I mentioned before, for fixing the ditches, stone lining ditches, but the,
Would it have to be for gravel road only?
no.
No.
No, but the road has to be hydrologically connected to the stream that go into the war.
Yeah.
Within, I think 100 feet of a pond or something like that.
So it's for water quality.
Yeah, to keep it silt out of the lake. And the rep from Regional Planning Commission looked at all of our roads, because we've done these in the past, these grants. And I think we've got just about everything covered that you could use it on. And she couldn't find anything new that would apply on these. But I'll run it by Kevin again and maybe
Not in Kevin, right?
see if anything else.
If there's something there for music, we'll take advantage of it.
Absolutely. No, pass up very much.
Yeah, I did send in a letter of intent, but I mean, that's not a commitment to it.
That's okay.
So we have to apply for it, or do we have to?
No, it's already appropriated to the town, so if we're gonna do something, we have to.
We had to put in our theory of what we're gonna do with it.
Right.
Okay. Anything else on that, David? Okay. Discuss use of ERP funds for the town library. Yep.
You asked me.
I did actually put that on that email.
Followed up by Becky Root,
Yeah.
wanted to get money to fix the roof.
She asked her to apply for this ERP funding. Do you know much about that funding?
I do not know about the library specifically.
Yeah.
I do caution that the library is a permitted expense, and what they're looking for is a permitted expense.
Yeah,
It needs to be COVID related.
yeah.
They do talk about economic development and, public health issues, so you could potentially do things that may be kind of broad. I don't know that they're gonna approve this. I can reach out to VLCT, Katie Buckley, and say,
Check
hey.
out from the educational side too.
Well-
Some funding in there, something about education, how much stuff you give me too.
Yeah, but I don't know that it's gonna do furnaces and ice dams.
But this ARPA
You
grants
can say
is,
ARPA.
ARPA, whatever you call it, is just COVID related grant money?
It is COVID or public health related.
Oh.
So I just, and
I did read through it quickly and I saw something about like air purification system, stuff like that.
so if you want, I can reach out to Katie for her to say yes or no. And
Absolutely, I mean, I'd like to see if there's something we can apply for.
If there's something within the furnace and air quality aspect that may, but I think you're really grasping.
I
think
think
you're
we're
grasping,
stretching.
yeah.
But it doesn't, we hit on it earlier.
Maybe they can, like in the area they want to,
Well, that's-
maybe they can apply for this for
Well,
that area.
the other thing is, to come back to the building communities, they could apply for some funding through that, I think. I don't know that there may not be better streams for them to apply for these things through.
Can you
But I'll
reach out and check on that, please?
While we're on the library, we need to set up some kind of meeting for a couple of us to start having discussions with the library real soon, because we're pushing August already, you know.
I'm willing, I advocate for Dave to be on board with that, he was part of that, that last year as well. We
Yeah.
do need to get that going.
I'd like a couple board members, or maybe a couple library trustee members to be on that conversation. Because I don't think anybody else wants to join Mark. Talking about having a committee with the library and select board that we talked about there once, so we can discuss this whole interchange thing. Mark volunteered to be on the committee and you look for something to be in that discussion with Mark. Anybody else, if you're interested, you can probably get your plate full.
I do have a pretty
That's
full plate at the
very good.
moment.
Fine.
Early, got any spare time?
When you gonna do it?
I don't know, whenever you guys decide to make a meeting. Yeah.
Maybe we have to talk to them.
We can go, like, David can go to the library, and you, if you were interested, you and Mark can see if you could just set up that meeting at some point.
And we started a discussion last year, I think we probably still have some notes on that, you can go back up and share with Earl.
Yeah.
It's a discussion of bringing the library into the town, how do we do it? We decided last year, it is something that we should be doing, will be doing, which is how do we get there before the next fiscal year comes around?
Before the next fiscal year.
Yeah, so we got a lot of time messing around.
No.
We're kind of dragging your feet, and getting,
Yeah.
taking the ball out of horns here, so.
Well, I don't know, try to set something up for next week.
Okay, got that, David, in notes? Okay. Thank you, Earl.
Yep.
And Mark. Set time for quarterly financials. We didn't do our quarterlies in July like we normally do, so we'll do quarterlies next month.
You can do it, do it the first week. Oh, I did orders on the second meeting, if you wanna do the financial
Just
first
know the
meeting,
second
that's
meeting,
fine.
that's all. Just what I
Whatever you
follow
want.
up. Okay,
Wanna
so we'll do it on the second meeting?
So the second meeting,
Second meeting in August, we'll do that. It'll be the first thing on the agenda.
so you want it 6:30 or 7?
I think 7 o'clock's fine, it won't take us that long to go through it. Just-
last.
Oh, yeah. Someone's getting books.
I know,
Yeah.
that's why I did.
Alright, so we're good on that, you good, David?
Yep.
Old Town Business, discuss damage to window lipping.
Yeah, there's an estimate in there.
Yeah, I got an estimate for the replacement of that, lipping on, it's over here.
Yeah, but we don't have any idea what that stone's gonna look like, he said it, his estimate said.
Right, you said it could vary.
But he can't show us
It's
what
a-
it's gonna be.
It's a closest match to.
Yeah, but he must know what he's using so that we
Well,
can
you
see it.
hang on, Earl. I'll get it for you. I think I got
I
it.
mean, is it
I think
purple?
he sent me a picture. No, it's not purple. It's the
Alright.
closest match you can get to it. Bear with me.
I mean, it's gonna stand out a little bit because it's brand new, once it ages a little bit.
Right there.
So,
There's a picture of it.
you know,
Looks pretty close to me. Earl, you wanna look at it? That's a picture of the stone, the actual one they're gonna cut.
I think it was tabled last
He's
week.
been to about 4 different, Corey outfits to, yeah, there you go. Find anything else good in here?
No,
Careful.
Did you lose it?
Careful.
Oh my god, you'll yell at somebody else, you'll be texting somebody.
I got it,
Yeah, went real small. Is that a zoom in or a zoom out picture?
I don't know.
That's
Sure,
zoom
touch it
in.
or zoom it out.
It's kind of on the gray side, which this is, but it's a little bit lighter probably.
About as close as you're
Because it
gonna
hasn't
get.
been weathered and
Yeah.
aged quite as much as the.
He took pictures of it and brought it to them, and that's the best.
Well, I mean, I'm just asking, they must know what, it isn't like every, they don't know what stone's gonna be there when they put it in.
Yeah, no, so,
Yeah.
he jaded all the stones on, all the brick on his building
Yeah.
3 years ago, so.
So do we need to
So we need to
approve
do,
that
we
bid?
need to do that in order to, when we're replacing the windows, it
Right.
needs to be done, so that's what I had.
So do we need to make it a motion
Yeah.
to approve this?
I need a motion to approve this.
I'll move.
Alright,
I'll second that.
alright, and do you have that in here, David, the amount?
2350.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the amount of 2350. Any other discussion on that?
I just have one question, will he do it before the new window's installed, or will he do it?
I'll ask him.
I'm just curious what the
Yeah, I
process
think he
is,
told me he
that's
could do it before they put the window in. It needs to be done either at the time the window's out or I think he said he can do it before.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to do
I
it
just
after.
was questioning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? No. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let's have it. Alright, good. I just think 6:01 in the morning, right?
Yes.
Wow, I'm all off track. The window tint and forward.
And I called that firm 5-star, they
Yeah.
recommended, and they said for both windows it'd be $200.
Yeah, so that's what I said, $200.
And then he was gonna bring in some samples to show the clerks what they look like. And
That's the simplest thing.
Yeah.
He does all kinds of commercial buildings.
It's better than 100.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would.
And well, and as explained to David, down the road, if something's wrong and you don't like that tint,
Take
you
it
can
off.
take that off. We order a window that's tinted, it's there forever. You know, so,
And it would be for double pane windows.
Yeah.
So.
no, it's very reasonable. So we're all good on that. No, because we didn't change anything.
No, and also we have to wait for the new window to get like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, so. And it's all done on the inside, so it doesn't matter whether it's on or whatever, so. Yeah, maybe road update, culvert. Grant,
Oh,
that's you.
that was all, I signed off on it, sent it to the state, they signed off, sent it back. So that grant agreement is active now, and I've written up, and I sent it out to the board a few days ago, I think, the request for proposals. And I've put it in the DLCT classifieds and also send them directly to engineers in our neighborhood.
What was the deadline on that thing?
August 16, to submit.
Submit, like completion of the project.
Oh,
January?
No, it's December 31st, 2023 for that grant money.
All right.
Yeah,
And hopefully we'll get this done and then get grant money for the paving on the road.
yeah. Okay, so you're good on that?
Yep.
Alright. D, town constable duties info, one. Mr. John. How you doing?
Alright, you?
Not too bad. I wasn't present at the last meeting, so I guess you came to the last meeting. Where did you leave it with the?
We just left it, we asked him to get this information, find out if he could be appointed or had to be elected, which you know the answer now.
Okay.
And then fill out the appropriate paperwork, which he has to.
Yeah, and also research the state's description of what a constable is. And he has, Mr. Perry has that, and also not to all the others.
Okay.
Like the incident with the, Mr. Nolan, if the animal control officer couldn't respond, the constable didn't respond. That's what the regulations say.
Could be, I'm not positive
I
about it.
will, I read it
Yeah,
twice.
Yeah.
Once yesterday, once today.
okay. Okay.
Has we been, it says, look, I'm just looking at look at it, PMD too. Are we authorized as a select board to appoint, because it does say that the constable is an elected official unless it's been voted that the
It's always been appointed.
that doesn't, is there a vote that took place? I don't ever recall voting to have the select board appoint a constable.
It's been that way since I've been here. Prior to that, I had no wish to get it. And there were several,
We used to vote for town agent and grand juror, but the constable's always been appointed.
Alan was at one time.
right,
Alan was,
Ray Dixon,
Garrett was.
Ray Dixon before Alan.
Yeah.
And they were all.
And then Derek Billy was our last.
They haven't been, never been elected.
I can remember appointing Garrett, but.
It must have been a long time.
Yeah, I think they've been appointed for, I can go back and try and research it, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, up a late night phone call.
Is there, and the other thing too, that's in the statute, is that if a town appoints them, we can decide, if the select board appoints them, I should say, we can decide what his responsibilities are and what we want him to do. I mean, he could actually arrest people if we wanted.
No,
Not without law enforcement training, but if he had law enforcement training,
You can.
If he had been through the academy,
Right.
I believe so, I think that we got to discuss this.
so do we have some kind of policy or?
Well, I could tell you, in the past, the only thing the constable did was serve summons for lawyers. And they paid them, the town didn't pay anything. And that was.
Plus, what I read in the regulations today, and you help the animal control officer out.
Well, yeah, we probably.
But it sounds like it needs help.
Well,
Yeah.
I disagree with that statement, but.
You
I mean,
could,
just
it
from-
said you could destroy dogs and everything.
Yes, it does. But
Do we,
But that's really a policy decision for the select board, I think, whether you want a constable to do that.
But we don't want
I don't
a
want
constable getting into the animal control officer's business. That's what I don't.
what it says in the regulations,
Yeah.
or the information that Dave sent me, that we also respond.
Yeah.
He takes control of the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, in
What
this
the
situation that I saw
constable is,
tonight,
yeah.
where he didn't even pay him a visit after being attacked and stuff, I didn't think that was right.
Yeah, well, we won't go into that, because
No,
there's
There's a lot more to the
Yeah,
story.
I don't know the whole story,
No,
but
that's
what
fine.
I heard tonight, I just didn't think of.
what I'm,
one side of the story.
what I'm saying, does the town have a policy that it wants its town constable to follow?
I don't think there is.
I don't think there is.
So there isn't.
No, is there a need? I don't know. What has the constable done?
Well,
In the
I
last
said,
Much of anything.
nothing for the town, all he does, or did in the past, was attorneys would call him to serve a summons to someone for a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And they would pay him, and the town didn't pay anything.
Yeah.
That was it.
For me, I mean, I'm just on the outside, so to speak, to make a job description for
Yeah.
a job that do we need or not need,
Mhm.
I don't know so we need it.
Well, I guess the question is, even do you need a position?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, if there's a position there, and you don't need it, why is the position there?
It's always been,
Yeah.
it's always been, as far as I know.
Mhm.
I think, for me,
I mean, I know the last couple ones that I know of that have been in, were also the animal control officer, it kind of went together. And we didn't bother with it with Jim, but.
just my understanding with constables in a lot of smaller communities such as ours, or maybe even smaller, is some of this law enforcement kind of stuff that we've had training on to help when needed. That's how I've always understood it. I just have a hard time reasoning to myself to create such standards for ourselves, another oversight that we have to do it for a job that we need it. I haven't heard that either, that's all.
Well, I sort of agree with that, I mean, if we're not, if it's a position that has probably outgrown
Where we are.
itself as far as what it was originally intended for,
Have we had any discussion with the PD as far as this position, it doesn't do anything for them that I know of. I mean,
Not from.
well, us having someone in that position, is what I'm saying, yeah.
As commissioner, I meant
No,
Well, my take
I'm sure they can.
my take is, I guess I'm gonna disagree with you guys. If you got a local, longtime resident of Swanton that wants to give back to his community, I think you should be given an opportunity. You're welcome. I mean, I understand, I understand what's being said, but, I would hate to, be against this and have Mr. Barra leave with a bad taste in his mouth. Here I come forward, I mean, he's also served his country. And now he's coming forward and wanting to give back, and more or less we're saying, no, we don't want this, because, I mean, he's fully aware of what his duties are gonna be. They're very limited.
Right.
But the fact that he's offered to come forward and do this, I feel he should give him the opportunity.
I'm not doing it for the money.
No, you already said.
neither do we.
I just wanna
Mhm.
contribute.
Sure.
And I mean, we're all entitled to our individual thoughts, because if otherwise, I think you guys remember, when you interviewed me for the position, I said, I'm not a yes man.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. I think you should be given.
I'm not a yes man either, so.
I think you should be given an opportunity for the position.
well, if that's the case, you made a very compelling argument, Ed. As long as he fully understands there isn't really much to this job.
I know it also says.
I'm certain, what I'm hoping is it'll,
And stuff like that.
give you a chance to get involved more in something that does have more responsibility in the future. So I'll make a motion that we approve him as constable.
I second it.
All right, any other discussion?
Well,
I just have one thing. So this documentation of what the constable does, is this ours or is this state?
that came from the BLCT.
BLCT, okay.
That's what the statute.
Okay, yeah, no, that's all I was asking.
There's one more thing, and that is that if you read that, what they wrote,
Oh,
it
bond
requires
requirements.
a bond to be determined by the board, how much you want to bond the position for.
So we would have to bond the position as a town?
Yeah, Kathy and I think Tanya bonded because they have more money, up to a certain amount. It's like insurance, if something happened, then the town's covered.
Yeah. Have we ever
So
bonded
What's the
one before?
normal amount?
I'd have to see what it is. We'll have to talk to our insurance company to see what it is.
Well, I would think we as a city and town should be able to tell us the.
Yeah,
the
but that
information
will,
we need.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
our insurance company. We'll have to call them and ask them what it's gonna cost.
The other thing, Jim, that I'd like to put out there is, because of the fact that this is a limited position for Mr. Carroll, that down the road, he might decide to run for something, he might decide to get involved in another capacity.
Or animal control.
So if we close it, very good.
Yeah, sure.
I'm supposed to take my medication, guys.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, okay, so we got a motion, we got a second, any discussion, anybody else discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it.
So what now?
I was just gonna ask that, so what is there anything?
Well, we'll check with passive or
Yeah.
insurance and find out what the
Yeah.
bond's gonna cost. It's not you, then it's somebody on you.
I think you need to reach out to chief too, because I thought there was something with the, I remember in the past, there was something with the PD that we let them know that we
I
have.
believe you're right.
Yeah, there's something, we need to ask Joey. Don't ask me what it is exactly, but I know there was something, but when we did Derek, when Derek was involved, there was something we had to do with Joey and Derek. We need to Constable. I don't remember exactly what it was, but.
Right now I have on my cell, unknown numbers go silent, but I'll undo that, so.
Yeah.
You all have probably have my phone number anyway for my application.
And
Yeah, and,
the other question I have with you, David, for Mr. Barrow, I'll tell him, email it.
You gotta tell, what's the term of the appointment was
Like we
in
got
here?
for our email, will he have one?
It'll last until the next annual or special town
I'd
meeting.
have to order it.
But this is.
Yeah, that would make sense, so it would be.
Would you
I don't
prefer
know,
to
and bond requirements,
email
from what I'm understanding,
down
his appointment will last
both
until the
to your
next
personal-
annual or special town meeting.
Not to be appointed, reappointed.
That's what I'm asking.
Correct.
It says
From my
in here,
understanding.
it's a
It's less hassle for you
one-year term,
folks.
so it'd be
Well,
until
The reason I asked him if he would prefer to have a town email like we do, with the town, or if he wants to use his own personal, he said he just would use his own personal, that's fine. So that's fine.
Did I put that, was that on there?
I'm not sure.
So I can give it to you.
The other thing we could do is the same as the animal control, give them a Gmail that's specifically for the position, and then you won't have to use this.
Yeah, it's first one.
And then that'll go on the directory then, on the website. And that way people won't be bothering this.
Oh, that's,
And it's better that way too, because there have been
Gmail.
Gmail,
My
yeah.
wife wants to set up on the computer.
Yeah, it's easy to do. But in the past, there have been, before we went to the GoDaddy emails, there were select board members that would get on their personal emails
Oh, okay.
because he didn't have a good enough password. And
We'll have that one.
then they said, whoever hacked them sent out emails to everyone else saying
Well, you
that
can
he's going stranded and.
David will work with you with your email and get that in your contact information, he can send it to us.
Well, I've got him in my contacts already, so you can give me.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could set up the Gmail account and just everything.
Sounds good.
Because it should be done that way.
Oh.
It'll be a town email. And then if someone else becomes constable in the future, they get the same email.
Now, well, I had knows anyway, I'm a big white tail fruit. And I go to Virginia for 3 weeks every year. Is that gonna be?
don't worry about that.
Is that gonna be a conflict now?
No,
Okay, because we pay our,
we all take vacations.
we pay our, we got 10,000 acres on, we pay our.
Yeah.
You're all good. All you do is just notify the administrator,
Right,
That's fine.
you know,
I just wanna make sure.
even if you do it a month prior to.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And then he in turn will send it out.
I'm gonna try to get 15 down there.
He'll make it out on an email to all of us,
So I got 9 last year.
everybody knows.
Thanks. Okay,
Alright.
thank you, sir.
The only condition is you have to share that.
I do.
Yeah, okay.
You ever had a can?
I'm talking about with your select board.
No, have you ever had a canned venison?
I have,
I have about 50 to 75 quarts.
I have, and it's very good.
And they provide the tin and it's all they have in a quarter. Here you go.
Gifts to all.
Excuse me?
You giving gifts to a elected official?
If nobody knows.
You're on
Never worked
camera.
in a public meeting.
You're on camera.
Oh, did I just say that?
You'll be alright, we'll beat you out.
We're on.
Alright, have a good night, we're gonna move on, sorry late. Thank you.
Good save, yeah. Just give me a holler when you want me to come in. So I've been on this town, I forget the young lady's name over there.
Oh,
Nicole.
Excuse me.
I helped a farmer out in his 60s, door to day. He's got 2 bad hips, so I help him about every day. So, and he tries to pay me and it won't take him nothing.
it's all good.
So he gave me a cow, but I mean, if you need to get home, that's probably what I'll do.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey, Bob.
I just enjoy it, it gives me
Alright,
a peace of mind, you know?
okay, thank you.
Thank
Have a good night. Flags for Veterans Scholarship, George, update, sponsorship, sorry.
Yeah, just an announcement that the flags for veterans are still available for sponsorships. So we have about half of the 40 sold already.
Okay.
So if people are still interested, they should get an application online on our website. Bring it in and pay Kathy the fee for the sponsorship, and we'll get them on the list.
Okay, Community development, is that just boilerplate? You got something else?
I'm gonna be so darn quick, I almost said the other word. We went monthly, so I wasn't prepared for an update, so
That's
there
fine.
isn't one.
Perfect. Sounds good to me.
I love that.
Yeah. General orders, expenditures. And those are somewhere. On the stack. Oh, here's how it's supposed to be. No? Must be right.
Oh,
here.
changes from what you emailed out, right?
Nope, no changes.
General orders from 6/16 to 7/20. I hear a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve general order dated 6/16/21 to 7/20/2021.
I will second that.
Alright, any discussion?
No, I just asked Kathy before we started, but just to have it on record, there's been no changes from what she emailed out.
Perfect. We got two different payouts for Cornerstone Construction, you?
Yes, there is. One was for the windows and one was for.
Yeah, one was upon signing the contract, and the other was
And one
for.
got in
Okay, yeah, I recall that, yeah.
Oh, and actually, it's on there again, because we dispersed the 18,000 before, but they lost the check.
Yeah, I think that's what you told me.
So that's a replacement check, we're not paying them again, because they were on a previous order, but I put a stop payment in the check.
Yeah, okay,
So,
that's fine.
they're on, that's why you see it again on this order.
Okay. Sounds good. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Yeah. Highway orders. Highway orders from 6/16/21 to 7/20/21.
I'll make the motion to approve the highway order dated 6/16/2021 to 7/20/21.
I second it.
Any other discussion?
I had one on here, I'm going through there, George Wood roadside service.
Yeah?
Twice.
No, you don't wanna know.
What do you
Tire
think
after
it is?
tire after
That's what
tire.
I think it is, huh?
We had tire nightmare for about 2
Three
weeks, so.
times.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was, yeah.
That's what it was.
More.
We fixed the leak on one tire, and then the next day, the tire blew outside the road on the other side. And then we fixed
On
that.
what, a truck or?
Our tractor,
The
Right.
mower.
yeah, our mower side mower. And then the other tire started leaking on the other side, so.
We got it through.
Knock on wood, we're
We got one tire left.
back on track. Actually, we just ordered 2 new tires for the front of it, so, cause they were all wore out, so.
So they got all the pavement all done, or?
Nope,
No, they still got
I'll
one?
get to that in just a minute, I got it on there.
Okay.
Yeah. Alright, any other discussion for the highway orders? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. And I hear a motion to approve payroll. Payroll orders from 6/16/21 to 7/20/21.
I make the motion, accept payroll for 6/16/21 to 7/20.
Alright, any other discussion?
I second that motion.
Thank you, sorry, I wasn't listening. Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Super. That's done. Highway updates, paving is hopefully starting Wednesday or Thursday, it looks like probably Thursday they're hoping.
First.
They're gonna pave Frontage Road and Lasney Road, and then they're going to Albert, I think, to do some paving, and they're coming back to do our airport paving. So they, I think next week they'll be back to pave the rest of it, and then next week as well.
They didn't do it all in one shot.
No, they're not doing it all in one shot. Yeah, they had some time, wall time, must be the other town wasn't ready yet or something, so.
Try to make everybody happy.
Yeah, kind of, within the next week or two, we'll be. And, the sweeper is still being installed on the loader. They were missing a part or something, of course, they ordered that, so that's still down there. Truck is back and running fine, I heard no more about that, knock on wood, so.
What about the new truck, where we are?
Oh, that update on the new truck, Kevin went down to check it out last week. They're waiting on the dump body, but everything else is pretty much on it, the wing, the plow, everything is set, the system, the dump and all that, just waiting for the dump body.
Nice.
They were putting the valves in the cab and stuff, so they're gaining on it.
So they're excited to get that in there.
Yeah,
To get in the
so we're waiting on the body, so, but, should be soon. just continue roadside mowing. We replaced a culvert last week on the James Road that was rusted out. Got a few trees to take care of. The guy's been getting stuff ready for paving, the roads that we can take care of. Other than that, anything in particular. Any other necessary business?
Yeah.
Parking lot, put on each end.
Yeah, we have a request from the director of the Champlain Housing, who's in charge of this building,
Yeah.
to use our parking lot, their parking, for 3 days in August, when they have their parking repaid.
Yeah. Do they have any idea how many cars they anticipate?
They're planning 10, but we think that there's gonna be more, because they're having work done on that building. And probably the workers are gonna be parking over here too. And I asked her, I said, why can't you just park them on the lawn, they were doing lawn over there. And she said, oh no, we don't allow that, so.
It also might be difficult for some of the people to get out of their cars
Yeah.
on the lawn, to get out and to go back into the building, not having.
I think if we could assign some of that parking spots to that.
Well, I was just gonna say, if just tell them they can use that side of the parking lot and leave this for us, I think we'll be
That's
fine.
a great thing.
I mean, there's gotta be 15 parking spaces on that side of the lot.
So workers have to park on the lawns.
Yeah, exactly, let the workers park in their construction zone or something.
And she said 10 or 12 spots.
She said 10
Yeah.
for the employees, but they get visitors also, to visit the people that live there.
Yeah.
Well, some people live their own cars too, though. What do they do with those cars?
Yeah, they can't drive if they live
What's
there.
that?
Yeah, they can have a car and live there.
Oh, yeah.
But they do have cars.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't wanna block in their whole parking lot, our employees don't use the park, so.
Yeah, and if you notice that.
I don't think there are employees in there, it's a residential
Oh,
building.
you said 10 employees.
Oh, no, contractors working there.
The
Oh,
contractors
okay.
can park elsewhere, the residents, I would think would be okay to park in our
Yeah.
spots. I
Yeah.
mean, I walk with them every Wednesday and there's quite a few of them that have mobility issues, and that's why I bring up the concerns about them getting out on the lawn, I don't think
Yeah.
it's.
No, I wouldn't wanna park on the lawn. I just don't want 30 cars to come down and take every parking space we got, so.
The left side of the
Just try to keep
sidewalk.
everything over on that side of the parking lot and we're fine.
Well, and if it comes an
Simple.
issue, then you just say, no.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, it's only 3 days, it's not.
Typically, how many spaces during the day? I can see at night, if you have a public hearing like tonight, it's full out here, but.
Oh, maybe 8.
The 3 days, it's not like it's a week.
No.
It's
And
overnight.
other
I don't
than
think
the
so.
employees, on this side, it's maybe like 2 or 3.
I would just go back with David and
research
tell her,
during the day.
they can use the parking lot, try to keep everyone parked on that side. of the
Yeah,
parking lot.
tell
So
her
the
we-
town,
you
the
know,
town
when
can
you
use
drive
the
on
other
it.
side.
Somebody
Yeah.
pulls in over here, there's no place,
Yeah.
and it's available, I guess it ain't the end of the world, is
No.
it?
No.
At night would be more
We got bigger
efficient
fish to fry.
if
Yeah,
you're
I-
having meetings and
I
stuff.
don't know if you've noticed, but the village posted this side of the other side of the street,
Yeah.
no parking.
We did that earlier this year.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, no one can park there now, and that was overflow there.
Oh, so nobody can park over here across here?
Not on Church Street, no.
I wonder why.
No
Too
parking
many
signs.
people are using it for overnight
Overnight
parking,
parking.
all day parking, overnight parking.
Oh, really?
So. Okay, public comment, anybody got anything to add on a public comment?
I just wanted to take a minute and share with you guys about some fun things going at the rec. We have been, we're in our 3rd week of rec camp for kids. Second for Notch Camp, we have served 100 kids every day, from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we've fed them 3 meals a day. I'm very thankful for that, and our numbers continue to grow, which is very, very
I've
exciting.
heard positive feedback
Yeah.
from you guys, great job over there.
Yep, I see lots of pictures on Facebook, so.
We are having a blast.
Yeah,
So if you ever wanna check it out in the middle of the day,
Yeah.
just take a drive on by,
Yeah.
you'll see lots of fun, awesome things going on.
That's been good at night, aren't
No,
wow.
The same thing, yeah.
I would think you would.
I think my husband, he doesn't remember what I look like. Well, we're also hosting the state championships right now for softball.
Yep.
We got rained out this evening, so we'll have one more game.
Is there a parking problem over there? 'Cause I saw cars parked all the way down Blake Street.
Oh,
Up
you
on
know,
Grand
now that you
Avenue.
say that, when I come here tonight, they were parked over by the old
So that
furniture
makes
side of the building.
That is a problem, and they have been continually talked about.
Yeah.
Some parents are in disregard of
Yeah.
authority and rules, but the owners of both buildings have been alerted of the situation, and if they choose to have cars towed,
I saw
they
one
can do that at
right
their own
now.
discretion, and everybody has been made aware that the property owners can and will do that.
Mhm.
But we have lots of parking room down in the back area.
I saw that when I came through tonight, but it didn't dawn on me, you just said something. Yeah, no one's supposed to park on that side, so, yeah.
Are the beavers destroying your lower gravel parking?
The beavers are still very prevalent back in the wooded area, yes.
Someone told me they're chopping trees down into the south field.
They had, and
Yeah, we cleaned those up.
yep, the highway crew came and cleaned that up at the beginning of the summer.
Most of those are older ones, they cut down, they've been cut down for a while, but I don't know if they cut any ones that have been over there for a while.
Not in the last week or two. I mean, but further down in the wetland area, yes, they are still down there and they are still hungry.
Okay, anything else? Keep up the good work,
Thank you.
it's great. Upcoming events, planning commission meeting, 6 P.M. Wednesday, July 28th, in town office building, 1 Academy Street. DRB, 6 P.M. Thursday, July 29th, in person at the Village Complex, 121st Street. Why did they go Village Complex?
They want a bigger room where they can spread out and stuff, and also they get bigger crowds, so.
Because they will have in-person applicants too. So
Okay, just asked. Next select board meeting is Tuesday, August 3rd, 7 P.M. in person and or by Zoom, 1 Academy Street.
Do you have a DRB Zoom too? No, just asking.
That I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's just a question.
No, the DRB and PC have no Zoom. They don't want any.
Oh, okay,
Just for no, I will be out of office.
okay.
No, I will be here tonight.
Oh, you will.
I will be here.
Felon ready? Do we need executive session for anything? I think we're good. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn at 9:18.
Alright, any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.